Here in Florida with Brian Humphrey, the Public Information Officer for the LA Fire Department. Good afternoon, sir.
Great afternoon.
All right, we've got some sun here. You'll be going back to Los Angeles later today and going back to work pretty soon, maybe even tomorrow. One of the things you'll be challenged by is putting on your ears, which these days is more than just radio. It's all kinds of social media. One of the subjects of discussion here has been the evolution of crisis data. People reaching out over these networks asking for help. What are some best practices that you've evolved in the past couple of years as people are doing that more and more and, as research showed, expecting to get help?
One of the issues we've had to overcome both administratively and in the community is that social media is not merely a tool for disseminating information, sending out press releases per se. It's a tool for emergency public information and a conversation with the public. 70% of what we do in social media is listening. You can't answer a question, you can't offer information until you understand what the need or interest is.
So how do you understand and get that interest without people getting the feeling that the fire department is stalking them?
Well, one of the most important things is to jump into the pool, maybe lightly without making big waves, but to be in the room, so to speak. It's no different than a town hall meeting. People may curse you at a town hall meeting before you arrive, but once you're in the room, they'll at least say to your face what their concern is. And in social media, you have to have a presence where the people are. So it's important to be active, to be listening, to offer kudos where necessary, and in many cases, embrace some of your greatest critics. We found that some of our greatest and loudest critics have been brought over. We like to say even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. So if they've got something good to say, we applaud that. Where they're mistaken or don't understand our mission, we seek to interact with them in a very public forum that allows the group at large to see what's happening.
How did that transition happen?
Well, the transition, early on we had a gentleman who was very loud about not liking the fire department, what we did, and it was, how do we come closer to this man? Well, it turns out he had posted an article like a year earlier about drunken driving on Mulholland Drive. And I went back in his archive, learned a little bit about him, spent a little time, and said, you know, this article, as much as we disagree, he's spot on this article. So I put a comment in his comments and said, I want to thank you for bringing the issue of drunken and driving ahead of the public, and gave some stats. And pretty soon we began having a conversation online, and then it eventually developed offline on the telephone and other places. He's become one of our biggest advocates. So this can't happen with everyone, but at the very least understand their concerns, address them, and make sure people always know that you're listening.
How do you tell your staff how to listen? How do you show that you're listening?
Well, the most important thing is to listen in a strategic sense. Everything you get has to be handled with TLC. Every item you get comes to a fork in the road called TLC. It is either time life critical or requires tender loving care. There are no other options. So the first thing you do is separate the time life critical information that you feel is going to be important to your operations or endeavors, to guide people to call 911 if need be, or to give out large advice during a predictable crisis, a windstorm, a storm, a wildfire, giving people the 2 or 3 nuggets they're going to need to act. After that, it's important to look at the trends. And we utilize free tools, web-based typically, that allow us to monitor some of the taxonomy or the sorting that's already taking place online. We have such tools as hashtags. And we may even drive the hashtag. If we see people are disconjugate, they're using different hashtags, we may even jump in and say, you know, it would be easier for us if you use this tag or that tag, and try to coalesce the people around there, compliment them, find out who's the locker room leader, so to speak, and maybe give them a position of charge or authority, and let people coalesce around that. So there are great opportunities to be part of the community. And also remind people, long before the disaster, we're real people too. We have needs and desires. We need to eat and drink and use the restroom just like everyone else. And we're challenged in scaling our organization to the needs of social media. They understand that. And they not only become members of our community, but be advocates or apostles for our message.
Now, one of the challenges in messaging these networks, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or the next big thing, whatever that happens to be, is that information can and does get spread that's correct and incorrect. How do you avoid being a hub for that kind of passage of information that's not right? And what are some of the best practices to avoid that happening?
Well, we try to sign our messages, instead of via typical accounts, we try to own everything we can that's LAFD. When we send out large email blasts, I use a very specific signature, respectfully yours and safety and service, so I can track where these things are being sent. I also try to utilize tools that see if people are altering our message at all. Some of these copyright tools that are out there. You can see if people have altered things in their presence. That much said, when people stray, we reissue a message. We may even give a message that says, this is like the National Weather Service, a great example for us with key messaging. They say that the weather warnings will expire at a certain time. We may send out things like evacuations and remind people that if it's not updated at such a time, that it's no longer in effect. So we'd like to remind people that warning messages may have an expiration. They need to come back and check in after such and such a time to make sure they're still getting the same things. We don't want to have happen what happened in Mumbai, where there was a regurgitation of messages over time. It looked like there were still active shooters in a particular hotel when they were gone more than 24 hours earlier.
What are the other ways that you think through sharing the information that citizens give back to you? Because, I mean, ideally, you get into a reciprocal relationship where they're giving you tips. What are the choices you make in terms of so-called retweeting or resharing, etc.?
We try to retweet things when we can that are obviously meant for public consumption, that were not sent from a locked or private account, and that may show good humor, maybe pointing out something where we've made a mistake, whether it's a spelling error or something that may have a non-offensive double entendre of some sort, and we'll retweet that when we're caught, and we'll say, OMG, oh my goodness, look what we did, and a little smiley face, and try to put the tonality. It's difficult in text to share tonality. Mea culpa. It's so important for us to admit when we haven't done something right, that we're eager to get it better. And we're willing to be vulnerable in front of the social media community. They're more willing to accept us in so many ways.
What's the biggest mistake that you've made in these networks?
The biggest mistake I made in these networks early on was not gathering our official identity early on. We were scattered across several usernames and several things and trying to interact as a person. And because I'm only one of 3 people that do our job on an around-the-clock basis every day of the year, it was important to create user accounts that allowed my colleagues, allowed us to scale. Here are the issues. It's the same as managing an incident. It has to be modular, and it has to be scalable, and most importantly, it has to be sustainable.
If you were starting now, what would be the first thing you'd do?
That is a great question. If I had an idea that's going to get to be this big, I would ask the chief to assign me full-time to doing social media. It has become almost a full-time aspect of what we do, and I think any public safety agency should consider how important this is and how important it will be, and dedicate either active or volunteer staff to keep a close eye and ear on social media. It's moving from just the nice-to-know stuff, from some of the need-to-know stuff, the wisdom of crowds, the ability to map and geoposition, and be more effective in your services. If I could offer but one example, we had a press conference a while back. We watched social media, and the people in social media said, you know, the fire chief wasn't very clear about where the east boundary of the evacuation was. So I called the chief and said, at the 4 o'clock press conference, really, really emphasize the east boundary. I didn't say anything on social media. After the 4 o'clock press conference, the people were saying, oh my goodness, it's like he was listening to me. They really emphasized, he pounded on the podium, the east, you know. So again, if we listen, we can actually fulfill the needs and desires of people. But it's all about opening our ears.
Bottom line, has following these practices, has opening those ears led to better outcomes for citizens?
We believe very strongly that our open ears have led to better outcomes. We do a lot of things proactively when the weather gets good in Los Angeles. More than 1/3 of the city is mountainous terrain where people go hiking. We lean out and remind people to be hydrated, take a fully charged cell phone, let people know where they're going, give them safety tips. We know that people are leading safer, healthier, more productive lives because of our engagement. And not just an engagement with people who live in Los Angeles, but those who are visiting or coming to Los Angeles. We engage some people as we see them flying into LAX. We were among the first to welcome them to the city and encourage them to have a good, safe, fun, and productive time.
All right. Well, if you visit Los Angeles, you can find at LAFD or at Brian Humphrey, and maybe follow on or both of those accounts while you're there and see what he's talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you.